The light in my room at the Quiet Haven Hospice in Des Moines is always a sickly yellow, like an old newspaper clipping. It spills from a plastic fixture on the ceiling, making the wrinkles on my hands look like dried-up riverbeds. I'm 82. I spend most of my time here, in this bed, hooked up to machines that beep and click, measuring out the remainder of my useless life. The doctors say it's my lungs. Years of smoking in the service, then decades more after, but I know it wasn't just the tobacco. It was the dust. Not earth dust, moon dust. The same stuff that worked its way not just into my bronchi, but into my soul, 51 years ago. My grandson, Jason, a tech guy from Silicon Valley, brought me this tablet. "Grandpa," he said, "you're always muttering about the moon, about some secret project. Write it down. Post it on one of those conspiracy forums. People should know." He was smiling, thinking it was just an old man's ramblings, a way to pass the time. But I saw a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. He was always a smart kid. My fingers don't obey me so well anymore, twisted with arthritis like old branches. But I have to do this. I have to tell the truth about Prometheus, about what happened to Apollo 19, the mission that officially never happened, about Jack Hunter, Mark Rivera, and Charlie Boone, about what we found, or what found us, in the Sea of Tranquility, in the Webb Crater. The clock on the wall ticks strangely. The second hand stutters, sometimes freezing for a moment before jumping forward, as if to catch up. And sometimes it feels like it's going backwards. Like right now. Tick, tock, tick. I stare at it and a chill runs down my spine, despite the warm blanket. This started recently, along with the other strange things. Take the EKG machine next to my bed. The monotonous beep is my heart rate. But sometimes interference cuts through it. Static, like someone trying to tune an old radio to a forbidden frequency. I hear fragments, whispers, not words, but the feeling of a presence in the noise. I was a communications officer in the Air Force, then a NASA Capcom. I know every kind of interference. This isn't from our world. I look away from the EKG screen toward the door to my room. It's slightly ajar, framing the darkness of the hallway. But there's something there. A shadow. Not just a shadow, but a figure. Tall, slightly stooped. The outline is blurry, but there's something about the proportions, the way it stands so perfectly still, that makes me remember. Oh, God. No, it looks like a man in a spacesuit. An old A7L suit, the kind the Apollo boys wore. But this one is dark, filthy, as if it had been rolled in something viscous. And the helmet, it's impenetrably black. I blink. The shadow is gone. Just a trick of the light and my fading mind. The pills they give me cause hallucinations. That's what Nurse Patty says, a plump, kind woman with tired eyes. But I know what I see. I know what I hear. It's here. It's been waiting until I was weak enough for it to reach me again. The collector. I start to type. My fingers tremble, but I force them to work. Each word is a footstep in the lunar dust that still grinds in my lungs. I have to finish before the clock starts going backward for good, before the shadow in the doorway decides to step inside. The summer of 1974 in Houston was as hot and humid as a wet rag on your face. The Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center was humming with its usual activity, but something had subtly changed. The Apollo program had officially ended a year and a half earlier with the triumphant return of Apollo 17. We'd sent men to the moon 6 times, and the nation seemed to have had its fill of the miracle. The papers were full of the oil crisis, Watergate, and Vietnam. The moon was old news. For everyone except those of us behind the consoles in Houston and the men in uniform at the Pentagon. I was summoned to Flight Director Chris Kraft's office, not a common occurrence for a simple USAF communications officer assigned to NASA as a Capcom. Kraft's office was a bastion of calm and confidence. Model rockets on the shelves, autographed photos of astronauts, a heavy oak desk. But that day, the air was electric. Besides Kraft, there were two other men. One in a severe suit with a poker player's face introduced himself as Mr. Jones from the agency. The other was Air Force Colonel Arthur Slayton, a name I'd heard in connection with the newly formed and highly secretive Space Command. "Harold," Kraft began without preamble, his voice steady but his eyes sharp. "We have a new assignment for you, top secret. A clearance level so high they don't have a name for it. You're being transferred to Cape Canaveral, or rather near it." My heart leapt. The Cape? That meant new flights? I felt the same euphoria as in the 60s when every launch was a step into the unknown. But Kraft's next words quickly doused my excitement. "This isn't exactly NASA, Hal," Colonel Slayton continued, his voice quiet but commanding. "It's a joint initiative, Project Prometheus. Officially, it doesn't exist. To the world, you will be working on a new telecommunications satellite launch program from a new pad." "A new pad?" I asked. "Cape Liberty Air Force Base," Mr. Jones specified. "A few miles north of Kennedy Space Center. Fenced off, heavily guarded, no contact with the outside world without authorization. Your family will think you're on a standard assignment at the Cape." He slid a folder across the desk, stamped "Top Secret, Eyes Only." "Read it, sign here, here, and here. The non-disclosure is for life. Violation is punishable under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, wartime articles." I opened the folder. Inside was my transfer order. Signed by... I couldn't believe my eyes. President Nixon himself? Dated before his resignation? This had been in the works for a while. The project's objective was stated vaguely: to secure United States national interests in cislunar space utilizing modified Apollo program assets. Modified assets? Saturn V? A lunar module? A command module? But the program had been scrapped. "We didn't scrap all of it, Hal," Kraft said, as if reading my mind. "We kept some things back for a special occasion, and that occasion has arrived." "Your job, Cromwell," Slayton said, rising, "is to be the voice of the mission. Capcom, the link to the crew. The call sign from Mission Control here at Cape Liberty will be Camelot. The crew's call sign, you'll learn that later. Questions?" I had 1,000 questions. What special occasion? Why the secrecy? What did the Air Force want on the moon? But I saw their faces. They weren't going to answer. I was a soldier, a USAF captain, working among NASA's civilian geniuses. An order was an order, especially one signed by the president. "No, sir," I said. "Welcome to Prometheus, Capcom," Mr. Jones said, with a faint smile that didn't touch his eyes. A week later, I was at Cape Liberty. The base was indeed near the Cape, but separated from it by miles of swamp, razor wire, and patrols with dogs. Instead of the familiar buzz of Kennedy Space Center, there was a rigid military discipline. The hangars were painted camouflage green, and personnel wore uniforms or identical gray jumpsuits. Mission Control, Camelot, was located deep underground in a bunker that could withstand a direct nuclear hit. The consoles were familiar, but some of the equipment was clearly new, military grade, and everywhere there were armed guards. The euphoria of returning to moon missions was mixed with a creeping anxiety.
This wasn't Apollo. It was something else, something harder and more dangerous. I didn't know how dangerous yet. I just waited for instructions, staring at the blank screens that would soon show me the far side of the moon, the side no one was ever supposed to know about. Weeks of tense waiting and piecemeal briefings passed at Cape Liberty. We, the key personnel of Prometheus, were kept on a need-to-know basis, fed details about the mission in tiny spoonfuls. We knew a manned lunar flight was being prepared using leftover Apollo hardware, but the objective remained a mystery. The atmosphere in the underground Camelot was a thick soup of excitement and paranoia. We all understood. The stakes were impossibly high. The reveal came unexpectedly during another closed-door briefing in a conference room lined with sound-dampening panels. Colonel Slayton himself led the presentation. A grainy, black-and-white image of the lunar surface appeared on a large screen. "This is a photo taken 3 months ago by the automated probe Valor 6, Slayton said, pointing a laser at a specific area. The Valor program is officially tasked with mapping and studying the moon's gravitational field. Unofficially, it's looking for anomalies." The image showed a part of the Sea of Tranquility near the moon's eastern limb. The laser dot settled on a small, unremarkable crater. The Webb crater, the colonel explained, about 23 kilometers in diameter, of no interest to previous Apollo missions. He clicked to the next slide. A zoomed-in image of the same area. The quality was terrible, but in the center of the crater, something glinted. It wasn't the natural reflection of sunlight on lunar rock. It was a sharp, metallic glint. Analysts at JPL spent weeks enhancing this image. Filters, computer processing, and this is what they got. The next slide was shocking. The graininess was reduced, the outlines sharpened. In the middle of the Webb crater was an object of clearly artificial origin. Mangled, partially buried in regolith, but unmistakably the remains of a landing craft. And next to it? "Is that a flag?" One of the engineers next to me breathed. "Precisely," Slayton confirmed. "A red flag with a hammer and sickle. Spectral analysis and the object's configuration leave no doubt. This is a Soviet craft. We believe it was an automatic station, something from their Luna series, or more likely, given the size and complexity, a failed attempt at a Lunokhod 3 rover last year, in 1973. Our intel said their Proton rocket blew up on the launch pad. Officially." Silence fell in the room. A secret Soviet craft on the moon? That was a bombshell in itself. But Slayton wasn't finished. "That's not the interesting part," he said, zooming in again, focusing on the flag. "Look closely." The flag wasn't just faded by solar radiation. It looked scorched, tattered with ripped edges. But the strangest thing was the blackness seemed to emanate from the center of the fabric, leaving the edges almost untouched, as if it had been set on fire from the inside out by an invisible flame. And there was something else. Near the wreckage and the flag, there were strange dark lines on the surface, leading toward the crater's edge. They didn't look like normal rover tracks. They looked like the mouths of burrows. Tunnels? "Red lines on the original negatives," Slayton added, pointing to faint artifacts on the first image. "We initially dismissed them as film defects, but they line up with these structures. Analysis indicates they lead beneath the surface. Depth unknown." Someone chuckled nervously. "Lunar moles?" The joke fell flat. No one was laughing. "The Soviets found something," Slayton concluded. "Something that caused their mission to fail catastrophically. Something that left this." He tapped the laser on the scorched flag. "And this." The laser circled the dark tunnel entrances. "The president believes we need to find out what that is, at any cost, before someone else gets there." So that was it. the purpose of Prometheus. Not scientific exploration, not peaceful discovery. It was a daring reconnaissance raid to the site of a Soviet disaster on the moon, to find out what caused it, and perhaps to claim whatever it was for ourselves. Apollo 19, canceled for the public due to budget cuts, had been resurrected in the deepest secrecy for this dangerous game. My heart hammered in my chest. This was madness. Flying to the site of an unknown accident where something so bizarre had happened that it left behind a smoldering flag and mysterious tunnels? But the order had been given, and I, Harold Cromwell, was to be the voice of this madness, the link between Earth and the 3 brave men who were about to step onto the shore of that distant dark sea. The decision had been made at the highest level, and the Prometheus machine kicked into high gear. The most difficult phase began: crew preparation and launch concealment. To the world, Apollo 19 was dead, buried under the weight of economic troubles and shifting priorities. In reality, its heart, the command service module Argonaut and the lunar module Hypnos, had been kept in pristine condition at a secret Air Force facility and were now being prepped for flight at Cape Liberty. The crew was selected not just for flight experience, though that was a given, but for psychological resilience, military background, and the ability to keep their mouths shut. The commander was Navy Commander Jack Hunter, a Vietnam veteran and carrier pilot, with a reputation as a hothead, but also a cool-headed professional. He would pilot the LEM Hypnos. His face, weathered and lined around the eyes, looked like it was carved from granite. He spoke with a slight southern drawl and had a penchant for gallows humor. The command module pilot for Argonaut was Air Force Lieutenant Charles Boone, an engineer to his core, pragmatic, quiet, with an unnervingly calm gaze from under thick eyebrows. His job was to stay in orbit and be the getaway driver. The third was Air Force Major Mark Rivera. He was a specialist in, officially, life support systems and scientific equipment. Unofficially, as I gathered from snippets of conversation and the nature of his training, he was a specialist in reconnaissance and special situations. He had a quiet, almost scholarly face and dark, thoughtful eyes. Rumor was he'd been in seminary before joining the Air Force. The contrast between his appearance and the toughness he displayed in training was startling. Their preparation was different from standard NASA training. Yes, there were centrifuges, docking simulators, and EVA practice, but the focus was elsewhere. Marksmanship with modified weapons designed for use in a vacuum. Why would you need a gun on the moon? Hand-to-hand combat in low-gravity simulations, psychological tests for resistance to stress, sleep deprivation, and hallucinations. They weren't being trained as explorers. They were being trained as commandos heading into enemy territory. That unfamiliar harshness hung in the air of the base, mixing with the smell of rocket fuel and ozone. In parallel, the cover operation was underway. At Launch Complex 39A, which had been officially handed over to the Air Force for heavy satellite launches, a Titan IIIe rocket was indeed being prepared. According to all paperwork, it was scheduled to launch a series of military communications satellites. The launch logs were meticulously forged, press releases were drafted, the public, and even most personnel at NASA and the Air Force were not to suspect a thing. The real rocket, the last remaining Saturn V, stood inside the vehicle assembly building, hidden from prying eyes. It was being prepared for launch in total secrecy. Even the engineers working on it were compartmentalized, each group knowing only their specific part of the job. The night before the launch, I saw the crew for the last time on Earth. They were suited up, walking toward the transporter that would take them to the pad. Their faces were hidden behind the gold-tinted visors of their helmets. Hunter gave me a wave, Rivera a short nod. Boone just stared straight ahead. Despite the bulky suits, You could feel the colossal tension in their posture. The launch was scheduled for the dead of night. No floodlights bathing the pad, like with the other Apollos. No spectators in the stands. Just the roar of the F-1 engines tearing through the silence of the Florida night. A giant white candle ascending into a black sky in near total darkness. The lights on the rocket itself were disabled. From the ground, it would have looked like a strange, silent, due to the distance, pillar of fire, rising to the stars and quickly vanishing. Any random witnesses might have written it off as a meteor or a UFO. I sat at my console in the underground Camelot. On the main screen, telemetry showed a perfect orbital insertion. Hunter's voice in my headset was calm, reporting flight parameters, but I could feel the steel nerves beneath that calm. Camelot, this is Apollo 19. We are in orbit. All systems nominal, awaiting TLI burn calculations. Roger that, Apollo 19, I replied, trying to keep my voice just as steady. Calculations in 5. Welcome to space. Again. The word again hung in the silent ether. The reborn Apollo 19 had begun its secret journey to the Sea of Tranquility, to a scorched Soviet flag and whatever lay beneath it. And no one on Earth, save for a handful of us in the Camelot bunker, knew that mankind was once again flying to the moon, this time not in peace for all mankind. The 3-day flight to the moon was mostly nominal. Mostly. There were minor equipment glitches, nothing critical, but enough to create a nervous tension. Small power surges in the Argonauts' life support systems, strange static on the high-gain antenna that couldn't be explained by solar activity or the ship's orientation. I wrote it off as using old, albeit proven hardware, but a knot of unease tightened in my gut. On the 4th day, Apollo 19 entered lunar orbit. Charlie Boone executed the braking maneuver perfectly. Now came the tricky part after landing. Undocking the lunar module, Hypnos. Hunter and Rivera transferred into the LEM and ran through the systems checks. Camelot, this is Hypnos. We are go for undocking from Argonaut, Hunter reported. His voice was brisk, but I caught the edge in it. Undocking was always a delicate moment. Roger, Hypnos. Argonaut, confirm you are go, I said. Go confirmed, Camelot, came Boone's steady voice. You are cleared for undocking. My screen switched to the camera mounted on the command module. Hypnos, looking like a clumsy metal spider, slowly separated from Argonaut. Everything was going smoothly until it was time to deploy the landing legs. 3 of them extended and locked with a satisfying clank that I heard through the LEM's cabin mics. But the 4th... Damn it, Hunter swore. Camelot, we have a problem. Landing gear 4 is no lock. We've got a red light on the panel. The tension in Camelot became a physical thing. Landing with a faulty leg was impossible. It meant an immediate mission abort. The failure of Prometheus. I can try manual override, I suggested, my eyes scanning the procedures on my screen. Already tried, Hal, Hunter shot back. The latch is jammed solid. Looks like something got stuck in the mechanism during assembly, or who knows what. Mark, can you get a look outside? Hunter asked Rivera. On it, Commander. Prepping for EVA. Rivera's voice was as calm as ever. This was an unscheduled spacewalk between the command module and the lunar module, which hadn't drifted far apart yet. It was risky. Any clumsy move could lead to a collision or a torn suit. I watched on the monitor, switching to Rivera's helmet cam. The black velvet of space, studded with cruelly bright stars. Below, the blinding gray, pockmarked surface of the moon. Rivera, secured by a safety tether, carefully made his way to the jammed leg. I see the problem, he reported. Looks like a small metal burr on the guide rail. It's blocking the latch from engaging. Can you clear it? Hunter asked. I'll try. The tools are useless here. It's too fine. I can't get to it. A second's pause. Commander, do we have the plasma cutter? The one for emergency hatch breaches? We do, Hunter confirmed after a beat. But it's high-powered, Mark.
One slip. I'll be careful." Another tense silence on the comms, broken only by the sound of Rivera's breathing in his suit. I saw him pull a tool that looked like a futuristic pistol from a holster on his thigh. A brief, brilliant flash. Sparks of fire, looking alien in the black vacuum. Another flash. "Done," Rivera reported. "The burr is gone. Try extending the gear." "Come on, baby." Click. This time, loud and sharp. "We have lock," Hunter exclaimed. "Leg 4 is green. Great work, Mark." "Returning to the module," Rivera replied calmly. A round of muted applause broke out in Camelot. Disaster averted, but it came at a price. "Camelot," Hunter reported once Rivera was back inside and the hatch was sealed. "That unscheduled EVA took longer than planned. We've used more oxygen and power from the LEM's life support than we can afford. We're going to have to cut our time on the surface." I looked at the numbers on my console. The oxygen reserve had dropped significantly. Instead of the planned 36 hours on the moon, they now had no more than 24. It meant their time to explore the Webb crater would be drastically reduced. "Roger that, Hypnos," I replied. "We're adjusting the mission plan. Proceed with extreme caution." "We're always cautious, Hal," Hunter chuckled grimly. "Though flying to the moon in a lander named after the god of sleep, not the best omen, is it?" His joke wasn't funny. The jammed leg, the oxygen loss. It was as if the moon itself, or something on it, didn't want Hypnos to land, as if it were already reaching out with invisible fingers, trying to stop them. The name Hypnos suddenly seemed sinister. Sleep can be eternal, especially out here, 250,000 miles from home. The landing of Hypnos was a nerve-wracking affair. With the reduced oxygen supply, Hunter had to pick a landing site faster than planned, relying more on his pilot's eye and experience than on lengthy computer calculations. He brought the module down, not perfectly, but safely, 23 kilometers northwest of their target, the edge of the Webb crater where the Soviet wreckage lay. It was far, too far to walk in the cumbersome A7L spacesuits. "Camelot, this is Hyplos. The Eagle, the sleeper, has landed," Hunter reported, slightly out of breath. "A little rough on the touchdown, but we're in one piece. Visually, it's a flat plane, not too many rocks. We're prepping for EVA and deployment of our little surprise." The surprise was a prototype second-generation lunar rover, a lightweight, foldable design that looked more like a reinforced golf cart than the massive rovers of the later Apollo missions. It was unofficially nicknamed the Lunar Cart. It was faster and more maneuverable, but less reliable and had a shorter range. It had been loaded into the LEM's storage bay at the last minute for exactly this kind of contingency, when they needed to cover significant ground fast. An hour later, Hunter and Rivera were on the lunar surface next to Hypnos. I watched them on the monitor, two white figures against a vast gray desert under a perfectly black sky. They quickly unfolded the cart. "Looks flimsy," Hunter commented, kicking a wheel with the toe of his boot. "Hope this thing doesn't fall apart on us." "It's rated for the local conditions, Jack," Rivera replied calmly, checking the battery connections. "Local conditions are vacuum, radiation, and dust that gets into everything, Mark. Let's roll before our oxygen tells us goodbye." They climbed aboard, Hunter at the controls, Rivera beside him, holding a special navigation tablet and a camera. They zipped across the regolith, kicking up a plume of gray dust. In the rover's headlights, the dust looked strange, almost alive. It didn't settle immediately, as it should in a vacuum, but hung in the air a moment too long, the beams of light giving it a strange, reddish tint. I checked the rover's sensor readings. All normal, just a trick of the light, maybe. The journey to the Webb crater took nearly 40 minutes. The landscape was monotonous, a gray plain, scattered rocks, the distant highlands on the horizon. But as they neared their objective, the atmosphere on the comms channel shifted. Hunter's jokes ceased. The breathing of both astronauts grew a little deeper. "I've got the crater rim in sight," Hunter reported, slowing down, approaching the target. The rover came to a stop on the low ridge surrounding the Webb crater. Down below, about 150 meters away, was what they had come for. The twisted wreckage of the Soviet craft, glinting in the sun. And next to it, the flag, red, tattered, with a dark stain in its center. "That looks creepy," Rivera muttered, aiming the camera at the flag. "Camelota, are you seeing this?" "We see it, Mark. It looks exactly like the Valor recon photos. Proceed with caution." They left the rover at the crater's edge and began their descent. They moved slowly, one behind the other, carefully scanning every rock, every shadow. The lunar surface here felt different, darker somehow, and the dust, it was behaving strangely again. With every step, it rose in a light cloud, but it was reluctant to settle, as if it didn't want to lie back down.
Temperature sensors are reading a standard negative 233 degrees Celsius on the surface in shadow, Rivera reported as he neared the wreckage. But the flag! He approached the flag until he was almost touching it. I could see on his camera feed his gloved hand hovering over the scorched fabric. "Camelot, this is incredible. The flag is warm. It's not hot, but there's a definite thermal reading. The sensor on my glove shows a local temperature increase of a couple of degrees. It's like it's smoldering, but there's no oxygen here." Ice crawled up my spine. A smoldering flag in a vacuum at over 200 degrees below zero. That violated every known law of physics. "Get away from it, Mark!" Hunter ordered, his voice tight. Rivera backed away. They stood side by side, staring at the sinister artifact. "How many steps was it from the edge of the wreckage to the flag, Mark?" Hunter asked suddenly. Rivera turned, looked back at his own footprints. "I don't know, about 13? 13, Hunter repeated quietly. Damn. 13. They didn't know it yet, but those 13 steps were just the beginning of a path into an abyss that could already feel their presence and was preparing to show them its true depths. The smoldering flag was just the bait, a sinister beacon marking the entrance. They cautiously approached the mangled remains of the Soviet craft. Judging by its size and shape, it was indeed more than just a rover. It was a full-fledged lander, possibly even with a sample return capsule. The disaster had clearly happened during landing. One of the legs was crumpled, and the fuselage was breached in several places. But that wasn't the strangest part. "Jack, look at this." Rivera's voice was quiet, but laced with shock. He was pointing at a large piece of debris, what looked like part of the habitat section. There, amidst the twisted metal, was something white and round. "Is that a helmet?" Hunter moved closer. Yes, it was a helmet, a Soviet Kretschet model designed for lunar EVAs. It was lying on its side, partially buried in regolith. But the visor was shattered, and from inside... "Jesus Christ!" Hunter breathed. On Rivera's camera, I saw what made my blood run cold. Instead of the dark glass of the visor, there was a gaping hole, and from it protruded something organic. Pinkish red, fibrous, pulsating? No, not pulsating. That was just a trick of the shadows. But it was hideous. It was flesh, turned inside out. Human flesh, right where the cosmonaut's face should have been. Was he
Inside? Rivera whispered.
Looks that way, Hunter said grimly. What the hell happened here?
The silence of the comm channel was shattered by a sharp burst of static on Rivera's frequency. Mark, what's with your comms? I asked from Camelot. I don't know, Hal. Interference. Hang on. And then, through the crackle, I heard it. A quiet, almost melodic sound. A child's voice singing a nursery rhyme in an unfamiliar language. Russian? Mark, do you hear that? Hunter asked, his own voice wavering. I hear it. A kid's song. In Russian. Where's it coming from? I'm getting something else. Hunter's voice grew tense. Latin. Someone's reciting a prayer in Latin, right in my ear. Voices. They were hearing voices in their helmets, on the moon, next to a mutilated corpse in a Soviet spacesuit. That's impossible, I exclaimed. Check your radio settings. Could it be crosstalk from Earth? No, Hal, Hunter replied. The frequencies are clean. It's inside the helmet, like someone is whispering right here. And the smell, Rivera added. Do you smell that, Jack? Ozone. A strong smell, like after a thunderstorm. The smell of ozone in a spacesuit, a sealed, self-contained suit in a vacuum. It was absolutely impossible. The life support systems couldn't generate it. Look around, I ordered, trying to fight back my own rising panic. The source of the voices, the smell, there has to be a rational explanation. They slowly turned, the lights on their helmets probing the darkness beyond the small, illuminated circle around the wreckage. The beams sliced through the gloom and found the dark lines on the surface we'd seen on the Valor photos. Now, up close, it was clear they weren't just lines. They were openings. Low, oval-shaped holes in the lunar surface leading down into the crust. They looked like cave mouths or tunnel entrances, black, bottomless pits. Tracks, Hunter muttered, aiming his flashlight at the dust near one of the entrances. Faint, but they looked like boot prints, Soviet-style boots. They lead in there. Rivera's camera zoomed in on one of the openings. The blackness within seemed to radiate cold? No, that was a subjective feeling, transmitted through his breathing, but the darkness inside seemed absolute, swallowing the flashlight beam without a trace. The voices in their helmets grew louder. The nursery rhyme became a haunting, repetitive loop. The Latin prayer devolved into a monotonous chant that chilled the blood. Camelot, what do we do? Rivera asked. His usual composure was gone. His voice was thin with fear.
I stared at the screens, at the two lonely figures at the mouth of the unknown, listening to the static and the phantom voices in their helmets. A rational explanation? There wasn't one. The laws of physics had checked out. Logic had fled. All that was left was a primal terror of the unknown, of whatever might dwell down there, beneath the sea of tranquility. The thing that had turned a Soviet cosmonaut into an inside-out doll and was now whispering into the ears of American astronauts, luring them into its dark home. A decision had to be made, and fast. The oxygen supply was dwindling, and the anomalies were growing more threatening. Hunter and Rivera stood at the dark opening in the lunar crust, an opening that seemed to exhale not just cold, but the very essence of madness, whispering nursery rhymes and ancient prayers into their ears. Camelot, what are our orders? Hunter's voice was sharp, demanding. He was the commander on the ground, but the final call came from Earth, from me and the men standing behind me in the Cape Liberty bunker. A dry click in my earpiece. The private line to Colonel Slayton and Mr. Jones opened. They were in a separate control room, watching everything on their own monitors. Cromwell, ask for their assessment. Can they determine the nature of the tunnels? Any sign of hostility besides the audio effects? Hypnos, this is Camelot. Report your assessment. What are your thoughts on these openings? Can you see anything inside? Is there an immediate threat? A threat? How? There's a corpse with its face turned inside out and voices in my head. We can't see a damn thing inside. It's pure black. The tracks lead in. Looks like the Soviet cosmonaut,
or cosmonauts, went down there, and apparently they didn't come back.
But what is it? Rivera cut in, his voice more analytical despite the fear. A geological formation? A lava tube? Or something artificial? The edges of the opening are too smooth for a natural occurrence.
We need to know what's in there, Cromwell. Slayton's voice hissed in my ear. That could be the key to everything. To Soviet technology, to the cause of the accident, to something bigger.
Sir, they have limited oxygen, and the situation is off-nominal, to say the least.
I'm aware of the risks, Cromwell, Slayton snapped. Relay the order. Hunter and Rivera are to conduct a reconnaissance, descend into the tunnel to the minimum possible depth, gather data, samples if possible, and return immediately. 15 minutes maximum for the entire operation. My breath caught in my throat. Send them in there? Into that black hole where voices whispered and a cosmonaut had died horribly?
Hypnos. Order from Control is to conduct a brief recon of the tunnel, I transmitted, hating every word. Maximum depth is the length of your safety tether. Time on task is 15 minutes. Gather visual data and, if possible, samples. Proceed with extreme caution. A long silence hung on the comm channel. I could only hear their heavy breathing. Are you serious? Hunter asked, his voice laced with disbelief. You want us to climb into that rabbit hole? The order is confirmed at the highest level, Jack, I said, quietly. God damn it, Hunter muttered. Just then, Charlie Boone's voice broke in from orbit. He'd been listening to the whole exchange on a dedicated frequency. Camelot, this is Argonaut. You can't send them in there. It's insane. All the data points to an extreme hazard. I'm requesting an immediate abort of this order and the return of the LEM crew. Boone's voice trembled with a mixture of outrage and concern for his crewmates. Argonaut, maintain radio silence. Slayton's voice, cold as ice, took over the comms. Your mission is to maintain orbit and await the LEM's return. Do not interfere. But sir, you are on a listen-only channel, Lieutenant Boone. Slayton cut him off. Any further attempt to disregard a direct order will be treated as insubordination in a combat zone. Out! Boone's channel went dead. They had simply cut him off from the primary link to the LEM, leaving him only the ability to listen. He was alone in orbit, a helpless witness. All right, Hal. Tell Camelot whatever happens, happens. Mark, get the tether. Let's go see what's on the other side of the Sea of Tranquility. Rivera silently began to unspool the thin but strong composite tether from his belt. He secured one end to a rock outcropping near the entrance. I'll go first, Hunter said. You belay me and get it all on camera. He switched on the extra lights on his helmet and chest pack and stepped to the edge of the black void. The lunar dust at the entrance trickled down like fine, dry snow, disappearing into the impenetrable darkness. Hunter's heartbeat, transmitted by his biosensors, pounded in my headset so loudly it almost drowned out his own voice. Well, here goes nothing, he muttered, and began his descent beneath the surface of the moon, into the abyss. Hunter's descent into the black fissure was broadcast to my monitor via his helmet cam. The first few meters were a narrow, almost vertical shaft with smooth walls that looked like melted basalt. The powerful beams of his flashlights only carved out a small patch of reality in front of him. The voices in his helmet didn't stop. The monotonous Latin prayer blended with the static and his own ragged breathing. The walls, they're strange, he reported. Looks like a lava tube, but the shape is too regular. And are they warm? No, can't be. Just my imagination. The tethers slowly paid out. 5 meters. 10. The shaft began to widen, opening into a larger space. Camelot, I'm in some kind of cavern. Hunter's voice was tight with tension, but also a hint of awe. It's huge. My lights can't even reach the walls or the ceiling. The camera view swung around as he tried to illuminate the space. And that's when I saw it, what made me grip the arms of my chair and forget how to breathe. The walls of the cavern, as far as his light could reach, weren't rock. They were covered in something else. Countless, compressed, interwoven remains, bones, skulls, fragments of bodies, mummified or flash-frozen, fused into a single mass that formed the walls of this gargantuan tomb. Millions of bones. And not just human. I saw strange, elongated skulls, ridged vertebrae of impossible sizes, limbs with extra joints, the remains of beings from different eras, different worlds, all brought here and mortared into the walls of this horrific crypt beneath the moon. Holy Mother, Hunter whispered. It's a graveyard. A galactic graveyard. He slowly panned the flashlight beam further, and in the center of the massive chamber, there was something else. A kind of altar or pedestal, built from the same bones, and on it, a figure. In a Soviet Kretschit spacesuit, the same model they'd found above, near the wreckage. The figure was standing motionless, its back to Hunter. "Hey!" Hunter shouted, forgetting all radio discipline. "Who are you? Are you alive?" The figure didn't move. "Mark, get down here. Now," Hunter ordered. "On my way," he replied, and a minute later, his flashlight beam joined Hunter's, illuminating the center of the crypt. They slowly approached the figure in the spacesuit. "Easy, Jack," Rivera warned. They circled around the figure and froze. The helmet's faceplate was shattered, but inside, there wasn't the inside-out mess like the one on the surface. Inside was a face, pale, with closed eyes, the face of a dead man, a Soviet cosmonaut. But that wasn't the worst part. From the back of the spacesuit, from rips in the fabric and metal, thin, translucent filaments stretched out. They pulsed with a faint purple light and reached up into the darkness of the ceiling and down into the bone pedestal itself. These filament tendrils were woven into the cosmonaut's body, like puppet strings. And then the figure twitched. Its head slowly turned toward them. The dead man's eyes snapped open. They were completely black, no pupils, no sclera. And he smiled. A wide, unnatural smile that stretched his dead lips. "Welcome," a voice echoed in Hunter and Rivera's helmets. Not Russian, not Latin. Clear, calm English. But the voice was composite, woven from hundreds of different voices. Men, women, children, old, young, all speaking in unison. The voice of a legion. What are you?" Hunter choked out, taking a step back. "I am the Collector," the voice replied from the dead man's mouth. "I keep what is left. I listen to the echoes of souls. I have been waiting for you." The purple filaments running from the body glowed brighter, and I understood. The cosmonaut's body was just a puppet. The real being, the Collector, was something else. Something vast, ancient, that inhabited this bone crypt beneath the Sea of Tranquility. A parasite that fed on souls? Memories? The very essence of those who fell into its web? What do you want with us?" Rivera asked, his hand moving toward the holster of the modified pistol on his thigh. "You are new voices, new threads for my collection. You bring with you the echoes of your world, so loud, so delicious." There was no echo in the cavern. The Collector's voice was flat, without reverberation, which made it even terrifying. It filled the entire space, seeping directly into the brain.
I could feel it here in Camelot, hundreds of thousands of miles away. A cold, alien, infinitely ancient consciousness. The Soul Collector, beneath the Sea of Tranquility, and 2 of our astronauts had just walked into its parlor. The encounter with the impossible paralyzed Hunter and Rivera for several long seconds. They stood in the center of the giant bone crypt, face to face with the reanimated corpse of a Soviet cosmonaut controlled by something ancient and monstrous, the Collector. The purple threads emanating from the puppet's body pulsed brighter, casting dancing shadows on the grotesque walls of remains. We're leaving," Hunter stammered, backing away toward the shaft they'd descended. "We don't belong here." "Leaving?" The Collector's multi-voiced whisper oozed from their helmet speakers, mocking and cold. "You are already part of the collection. Your fears, your hopes, your memories. They are mine now." The figure in the spacesuit took a step forward. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a marionette on strings. "Mark, fire!" Hunter yelled. Rivera, the former seminarian turned special situations expert, reacted instantly. He drew the modified pistol, a weapon that fired not bullets, but concentrated energy pulses capable of breaching a hull or disabling electronics. He fired 3 times into the figure's chest. Flashes of light illuminated the crypt. The pulses struck the spacesuit, leaving molten spots on its fabric. The figure staggered, but didn't fall. The purple filaments flared with furious light. Then something terrible happened. Rivera cried out, not in pain, in shock. He grabbed at his throat. "Mark, what's wrong?" Hunter spun toward him. He's... Rivera couldn't speak. His body convulsed. He dropped to his knees, his hands clawing at the inside of his helmet's neck ring. And then the Collector spoke again. But this time the voice wasn't coming from the dead cosmonaut. It was coming from Rivera's helmet. "Foolish flesh." The Collector's voice rasped through Rivera's own speakers, distorted by his ragged breathing. "Resistance is futile." I saw on Hunter's camera feed as Rivera's face twisted in terror and agony behind his visor. His eyes rolled back in his head. A purple thread, thin and almost invisible, was snaking down from the darkness above, entering Rivera's suit through a ventilation port on the back of his helmet. The Collector was plugging into him. "Join us," the Collector / Rivera's voice whispered. That whisper was layered over the telemetry of Rivera's heart monitor, which was being broadcast to me in Camelot. "Thump, thump, join us. Thump, thump, join us." The monstrous rhythm made the hair on my arms stand up. Hunter stared, horrified, from his writhing crewmate to the approaching cosmonaut puppet. He was trapped. "No!" he roared, raising his pistol again, but not at the cosmonaut. He aimed it at Rivera's helmet. "I'm sorry, Mark," he whispered. But before he could fire, Rivera, or the thing controlling him, snapped his head up. His eyes were now the same bottomless black as the dead cosmonauts. He drew his own pistol and fired at Hunter. Hunter dodged just in time. The energy pulse slammed into the wall of bones behind him, kicking up a cloud of osseous dust. The cosmonaut puppet surged forward, moving faster than before. Hunter was caught between 2 fires, his possessed crewmate and the ancient puppet. He fired at the cosmonaut, then at Rivera, trying to stop them, but the energy pulses only slowed them down for a moment. "Camelot, do you copy? It's controlling him! It's controlling Mark!" Hunter screamed into his mic. "We copy, Jack! Get out of there, now!" I yelled back, knowing how useless the order was. Hunter realized he couldn't fight them both.
He had to sever the connection, sever the collector's control. He spun around and smashed the butt of his pistol against the communications antenna on his own helmet, again and again. A crackle, a shower of sparks, and then silence. The link with Hunter was gone. All I saw was the last frozen frame from his camera, a blurry image of the approaching Soviet spacesuit with Rivera's black eyes in the background. Then, a black screen with the words, "Signal lost." I was left alone with the voice of the collector, still whispering from the speakers connected to Rivera's channel, layered over the frantic rhythm of his heart, "Join us, join us." And with the horrifying realization that one of our astronauts was trapped in a crypt beneath the moon, and the other had become a puppet for an ancient cosmic horror. What happened in the crypt after I lost Hunter's signal, I could only guess, piecing it together from the fragments of data from Rivera's still active sensors, and the slim hope that Hunter, if he survived, could report later. But the terror of the situation was clear. Hunter was alone against a possessed Rivera and the cosmonaut puppet, in the heart of a hostile lair beneath the moon. Rivera's channel was still live. I heard his ragged, choked breathing, the insane drumming of his heart mixed with the collector's whisper, "Join, collection, voices." Then came the sounds of a struggle, dull thuds, the scrape of metal on rock, the crack of breaking equipment, the zap of the energy pistol firing. Whose? Hunter's? Rivera's? Both? Then a scream, a cry of pain and rage that belonged to Hunter. Immediately after, Rivera's vital signs plummeted. His heartbeat became erratic, faint. His blood pressure crashed. "He's injured?" I whispered, staring at the numbers. And then a new sound. The sound of a tool. A high-pitched whining shriek, like a saw? Or the plasma cutter Rivera had used to fix the LEM's landing leg. What was Hunter doing? After several agonizing minutes, the whining stopped. Rivera's vitals stabilized at a critically low level. He was alive, but just barely. The collector's whisper from his channel faded to an unintelligible murmur. And suddenly, a telemetry link with Hunter was reestablished. Not voice. His antenna was broken, but his biosensors were back on my screen. His heart was hammering like a drum solo, but he was alive. His camera feed didn't return, but I could track his movement via the suit's internal sensors. He was moving, fast, away from the center of the crypt toward the exit, the shaft leading up. He was dragging something heavy. I knew it from the increased load on his suit systems. He was dragging Rivera. I watched his icon on the crypt schematic reach the base of the shaft. He started climbing, slowly, with immense effort. The oxygen levels in his suit were dropping catastrophically. He had 5 units left? That was good for mere minutes. He wasn't going to make it out with Rivera. He wasn't even going to make it out himself. Then, Hunter's icon on the schematic stopped at the very entrance to the shaft, on the threshold of the crypt, and Rivera's icon stayed there with him. Hunter had stopped pulling him. I understood his plan, his terrible, desperate plan. He couldn't save them both, but he could save the evidence. The sensors showed Hunter detaching something from Rivera's suit, likely the camera and data recorder unit. Then he quickly checked something on his own belt, probably the sample containers with lunar soil and perhaps fragments of bone from the crypt. Then his icon started moving again. He was climbing, alone, as fast as his exhausted body and bulky suit would allow. And Rivera, Mark Rivera, was left behind, lying at the entrance to the shaft, on the doorstep of the bone crypt, wounded, possibly still under the collector's partial control, his life fading. Hunter had abandoned him, left him to the mercy of an ancient horror in order to save himself and bring proof of its existence back to Earth.
I stared at the two dots on my monitor. One, slowly crawling upward toward salvation and an unknown future. The other, motionless, doomed, at the entrance to the abyss. 5 units of oxygen. An impossible choice.
Down in the crypt itself, the seismic sensors Hunter had deployed began to register movement. Dust devils were swirling up from the floor, though there should have been no wind, as if the cavern itself was breathing, or angry. On the inside of Hunter's helmet visor, according to the internal humidity and temperature sensors, fingerprints began to appear. From the inside, as if invisible hands were trying to grab him, to hold him back, to stop him from leaving. Hallucinations from hypoxia? Or was the collector reaching for him with its psychic tendrils? Hunter kept climbing. The 5 units of oxygen were vanishing before my eyes. While Hunter clawed his way out of the crypt, and Rivera lay dying below, in lunar orbit, 100 miles above the Sea of Tranquility, Charlie Boone was enduring his own private hell. Cut off from direct communication with the LEM crew, he could only listen to the fragmented transmissions and telemetry relayed through Camelot. He heard about the crypt, the collector, and Rivera's possession. He heard Hunter scream and the loss of signal. He saw the vital signs crash. He sat in the cramped cockpit of the command module Argonaut, staring at the silent gray moon below and the distant, shining Earth, a precious blue marble on black velvet, and he was utterly powerless. He couldn't help his crewmates. He could only wait and hope. "Camelot, this is Argonaut. Status report. What's happening with Hunter, with Rivera?" His voice was tight, demanding, ignoring Slayton's order for radio silence. This time I answered him, not the colonel. Slayton and Mr. Jones were too busy barking orders at technicians to try and restore Hunter's video feed. "Argonaut, Hunter is alive. He is ascending from the structure. Rivera is wounded, left behind. We have telemetry only from Hunter," I reported in a dry official tone, though my insides were clenched with horror and pity. "Left behind? You let him leave, Mark?" Boone cried out. "He had no choice, Charlie," I said more quietly. "He was almost out of oxygen. He's trying to save himself and the data." Boone fell silent. I could picture him up there, alone in a cold metal can flying over a dead moon. He was an engineer, a pragmatist, but right now he was just a man terrified for his friends. On the window of his command module Argonaut, the unofficial motto of Project Prometheus, painted on by a tech as a joke, was faintly visible. Ad astra per silentium, to the stars through silence. A bitter, cruel irony. A few minutes later, telemetry showed Hunter had made it to the surface. He was at the mouth of the tunnel. Oxygen levels, critical. 2 units. 1. "Jack! Jack, can you hear me?" I yelled into the mic, switching to transmit. "Get to the rover. Move." Telemetry showed him moving. Stumbling, unsteady, but moving. Toward the spot where they'd left the lunar cart. "He's at the rover!" one of the technicians in Camelot shouted. "Oxygen at 0.5. He's plugged into the rover's life support." The tension eased slightly. The rover had its own small oxygen reserve, enough to get him back to the LEM. "Argonaut, do you copy? Hunter is in the rover, en route to Hypnos," I relayed to Boone. "Thank God," he breathed. "And Mark?" "No data, Charlie. No contact." Hunter drove the rover back to Hypnos. The journey took over an hour. He was driving slowly, conserving the cart's energy and oxygen, fighting off the aftershocks of trauma and hypoxia. Finally, telemetry showed he was at the lunar module. It took another 30 minutes for him to get inside,
seal the hatch, and plug into the LEM's main life support system. Camelot, this is Hypnos. Hunter's weak, hoarse voice crackled in my headset. The first voice transmission since the crypt. I'm aboard. Alone. Jack, welcome back. How are you? I asked. Alive. For now. Hal, that thing. Down there? It's hell. Pure hell. Rivera, he... Hunter trailed off, unable to continue. We know, Jack. We heard everything. Prepare for liftoff. You're low on fuel, and your window to rendezvous with Argonaut is tight. Roger, Camelot. And then Colonel Slayton cut in again. Argonaut? His voice was as cold as space. Prepare to receive the LEM. After docking, and Hunter has transferred to the command module, you will jettison the LEM, then an immediate TLI burn for Earth. Your fuel is at minimums. There is no room for error. And Rivera? Boone asked again, though he already knew the answer. Major Rivera is considered killed in action. Your mission is to return Commander Hunter and the mission materials. You are coming home alone. Out. Alone. Boone was coming home alone. Leaving Rivera on the moon, in the clutches of the Collector. Leaving Hypnos, the witness to the horror, to be cast away. He was to erase all the evidence, leaving only Hunter and the sealed canisters with the recordings from the crypt. The silence was closing in around Project Prometheus once more. A silence that hid an abyss. The Argonauts' return to Earth was conducted in a grim silence. Hunter barely spoke, trapped in a state of shock. Boone flew the ship with the dark focus of an engineer performing a complex but distasteful task. All communications with Camelot were routed through me, and they were kept to a bare minimum, only necessary commands and confirmations. The fuel margins were razor thin. Any mistake could be fatal. Splashdown wasn't in the Pacific like the previous Apollos, but in a remote area near Guam, where a specially equipped U.S. Navy ship, disguised as a satellite tracking vessel, was waiting. No helicopters, no live broadcasts, maximum secrecy. The Argonauts' capsule hit the water right on target. The recovery team was there in minutes. Boone emerged first, pale, exhausted, but holding himself straight. Then, with the help of medics, Hunter came out. He could barely stand, his eyes vacant. His spacesuit bore the marks of his struggle, scratches, dents, dark stains of unknown origin. Besides the two astronauts, a small, sealed container was removed from the capsule. Inside were 2 data cassettes from the helmet cams, one from Hunter, one ripped from Rivera's suit, and several sample containers. The case was immediately locked, tagged, and handed over to men in severe black suits who had arrived on a separate boat. I caught a glimpse of one of them on the ship's video feed. He was holding a black umbrella, though the day was clear and cloudless. For some reason, that image stuck with me. Hunter and Boone were rushed aboard and placed in an isolated medical bay. A long period of quarantine and debriefing began. But what they said, what they revealed, never filtered down to us, the rank and file of Camelot. The rings of silence began to close around Project Prometheus. 7 rings, as the saying went in the Air Force, 1 for each level of secrecy. The evening of the splashdown, the first strange thing happened. Colonel Arthur Slayton, the Air Force lead for the project, vanished without a trace. He just didn't show up for the morning briefing. His apartment was empty, his car in its parking spot. No signs of a struggle, no note. He had simply evaporated. 2 days later, Mr. Jones from the agency disappeared. Same circumstances.
Then, key engineers and technicians who had worked on Prometheus began to disappear or get transferred to other, unrelated projects. Every day, someone else was gone. Those of us who remained were instructed to forget everything we saw and heard. Under threat of court-martial and charges of treason, all records pertaining to Apollo 19, Hypnos, and the Webb crater were confiscated and presumably destroyed. Cape Liberty was quickly decommissioned, its personnel scattered. I was transferred back to Houston to a routine job on the Skylab program. It was as if Prometheus had never happened, as if Hunter, Rivera, and Boone had never flown to the moon, as if the collector's crypt was just a bad dream. But I couldn't forget. The voices in the static, the scorched flag, the inside-out face in the helmet, the purple threads, Rivera's black eyes, the whisper of "Join us," mixed with a heartbeat. Sometimes old colleagues from Camelot would call me. They'd speak in hushed tones, checking the line. They told me strange things. One guy's ham radio at home would turn on by itself, tuned to a dead frequency that broadcast only white noise. Another heard a child crying softly in Russian at night. A third kept seeing a figure in an old Soviet spacesuit in the shadows. And then they stopped calling. Their numbers would be disconnected or answered by strangers who claimed no such person had ever lived there. One night, I got a call from a technician who had handled the data cassettes from the Argonaut. He was drunk and scared to death. "Hal, they're lying," he whispered into the phone. "The tapes aren't blank. I made a copy of the audio from Hunter's camera before they took everything. There's a noise on it, a terrible noise, like a million voices screaming at once. And sometimes, through the noise, a signal comes through, short, repeating. It sounds like..." The line went dead. All I could hear was static, the same kind of noise from the Apollo 13 tapes during their accident, the sound of a tape being fast-forwarded. Or was it the static from the collector's crypt? I never heard from that technician again. The 7 rings of silence had closed tight. The truth of Prometheus was buried deep. But I knew the collector was still there under the moon. It was waiting. And maybe it wasn't confined to the moon. Maybe its threads were already reaching for Earth. 2025. The yellow light of the hospice room again. My fingers barely move, but I'm finishing my story. The last lines on the tablet's screen. Jason will be here in the morning. I'll ask him to hit send. Let the world know. Let those who are planning new missions to the moon know what might be waiting for them. The Artemis program, humanity's new push to the moon. They're planning to build a base, to mine for resources. Artemis 7, according to the rumors, is slated to carry a new lander, the Selene. Its target, the Sea of Tranquility, for detailed geological survey. I know what that means. They're looking for it again. Or it is looking for them. If you see a cave, if you hear voices, leave. Run and don't look back. Don't trust your orders. Save your souls. I add this to the end of the text, my final warning. The light bulb over my bed begins to flicker. Not just flickering, it's tapping out a rhythm. Short, 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 long, short, over and over. I know Morse code. H, E, L, P.
I look at the door. The shadow is back. The figure in the old, filthy Soviet Kretsched spacesuit. It's standing on the threshold, motionless. The helmet is still as black as the abyss. But now I see something else. Thin, almost invisible purple threads are stretching from the figure toward me, toward my bed, toward the EKG machine. The beeping of the machine changes. It becomes erratic, arrhythmic, and then it merges into one long, continuous tone. The figure in the spacesuit takes a step into my room. Forgive us. Forgive us for the moon. We never knew what we were waking up.